leadership at the moment includes 14 devoted Clagett leaders coming from both the Diocese of Washington and the Diocese of Maryland. We've come to this point in this project because of that sound leadership. This board has come together to create a vision for the next several years that centers on ministries with children and youth. And this barn is a big part in that process.
When you see the barn, you think music, you think dancing, you think boisterous people having a great time. And you think of young people especially who gravitate to that energy like moths to light. And that's what I think the barn will give. That will allow a completely different dimension of spiritual grounding to happen here. And so there will be a lot of joy and exuberance at Clagett as a result of the barn when it's in its full expression. When I heard about the barn campaign, I jumped at the opportunity because I knew it would be a means of getting the word into more and more of our congregations about the gift of Clagett, the potential of it, and the opportunities, particularly for our young people.
It's a $3 million campaign to imagine this barn in new and fresh ways and really make a change in our ministries with children and youth and sometimes adults.
I was asked to serve as the co-chair for the campaign for the barn, and I was happy to say yes. And it also prompted some thoughts within myself in terms of what I would want to contribute. I also wanted to ensure others that I wasn't asking them to do something that I didn't also really believe in and was willing to gladly support.
It was getting away out of my everyday environment and going to a place of refreshment that called me to my spiritual center. That as a 17-year-old, a teenager, I committed my life to Christ because of camp. It's that important. If you believe in the future, give to this effort. If you want your young people to mix in with people of all sorts of different backgrounds and expand their worldviews, give to this effort. I am, and I hope they are too.
Please start making your way back to the convention. It is time for us to begin the afternoon session. Thank you to those who are here. Let's get this show on the road. Friends, it's 1:45. Please come back. And I thank you. You don't want to miss this video. Come on back, everyone. Come on. All right. Now we're going to see a video from Christ Church, Capitol Hill, and their ministry with the children of their community and their neighborhood.
One of the traditions at Christ Church on Christmas Eve is to offer a morning gathering time out on the front lawn with a petting zoo to teach them about how to engage with the story of Jesus' birth and the nativity with all their senses. What did Jesus first see when he was born? What did Jesus first smell when he was born? What must it have been like?
Make us faithful, trusting, and humble enough to find you in the most unlikely place. In your name we pray. Amen.
Our children offer us unique gifts. Every Sunday before our children's chapel begins, we recite Matthew 19:14. Jesus said, "Let the children come to me. Do not stop them, for it is such as these that the kingdom of heaven belongs." My own two sons have taught me that being in the presence of children brings us closer to the presence of God. I also believe that we, as the current stewards of our Episcopal tradition, have a precious responsibility to always be passing along our tradition to the next generation. What we do in this space is not about us, it's about them, encouraging and empowering and loving our young people as they grow up.
I want them to come into this church and feel and know that the space is for them too, which doesn't mean turning our sanctuary into a playground. What it does mean is making it so that they know that they can be who they are. And parents, I think, appreciate that message just as much, that parents can be who they are and bring their families in all of their beautiful messiness into our space. So they're learning that this church is a special place. It's not just any place. It's not a playground. It's not your bedroom. It's not your basement. But it's a special place where we come to be closer to God. They learn how to live in community with others, which means learning not to yell loudly in a church or run around with abandon, because they know that they don't have to do that. They're all on time for God, and God doesn't need them to yell to hear what they are asking for. What we do is experiment with what it looks like to tell them the truth of our faith and the truth of our tradition, and to invite them into a relationship with God for real. And it turns out that children respond really well to leaders and adults who are just genuine and authentic with them. We have found that we have to make some trade-offs sometimes and devote a lot of our time and investment into children's ministry, which sometimes means we have to change the way that we've done things in the past, and those decisions are never made lightly. But one example I can think of is one of our annual fundraisers we have in the spring. Normally, the funds from that event would go into the general church fund. This past year, we have decided to integrate it into our process of switching our Sunday school curriculum to godly play, which requires not just a financial investment, but also emotional investment from the parish. We had givers from all ages and all demographics and all family shapes and sizes become really excited about offering something to our children. We were able to fully fund godly play in this one evening.
I want our children at Christ Church to know that they stand on a solid foundation here, that they are loved and supported by so many people, that God smiled when God created them and placed God's thumbprint upon each of their souls, and that there is nothing in this world that they can do to change how very much God loves each of them.
Thank you. Welcome back. I hope you had a good lunch. We are going to stay in the lane of finances and hear the presentation and adoption of the proposed budget for 2023, with Mr. Steve Gibson serving as our chair of the Finance Committee, taking the podium.
Hey. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am here to present the proposed budget and to just give you an overview of what that budget contains. The full budget, the full line item budget is available in your booklet, and I hope that you have a chance to review it if you haven't already done so. You will note that, first I would like to thank Bishop Marianne and Canon Andrew Walter for all the hard work that went into preparing the budget. Putting together a budget is part science, part art, with a good mixture of prediction and balancing of resources, needs, and ultimately a vision of what the budget is all about, what it's intended to accomplish. So thank you to Bishop, Canon Walter, and their supporting staff for all of the time they've spent preparing this budget. We should have a slide here. As shown on this slide, the budget has 4 columns. The first is the 2022 budget. Next is a projection of how we will end how we ended 2022. Then the proposed budget, and the final column is the difference between the 2022 budget and the 2023 budget. In the booklet, it has a little bit of a mistake in the heading. It says it's the difference between the actual results and the new budget. It's really a difference between the old and the new budget. As shown in the slide, the largest item on the income side is congregational giving. And building this item, budgeting for this item necessarily takes into account the availability and the ability of the individual parishes to provide support for the diocesan mission. In preparing the budget for 2023, the bishop and staff noted that while parishes are coming out of the COVID shutdown and recovering, we still face a lot of economic uncertainty. Therefore, the projected congregational giving for 2023 has been held at the same level as it was in 2022. The other major source of diocesan revenue is Superfund income. Jonathan mentioned something about the Superfund income and how the annual budgeted amount is calculated. In 2021, the investment committee thought that for the long-term benefit of maintaining the Superfund, that the rate or the percentage of draw on the fund should be reduced from 5% down to a target of 4% of the assets. For 2022, it was reduced to 4.8%, and again, this year we're reducing it down to 4.7%. As a result, the amount of funding from the Superfund is down slightly for 2023 from what it was in 2022. The third largest item of budgeted revenue is an allocated portion of the 5-year grant from the Lilly Foundation, which funds the Tending Our Soil initiative. Revenue for 2023 from the Lilly grant, along with the contributions of the parishes participating in Tending Our Soil, is projected to be $250,800. Budgeted income for 2023 also includes $145,000 drawn from the Court and Education Fund, $150,000 anticipated from the Bishop's annual appeal, $100,000 of interest and dividend income, $90,000 of income from other sources, and $25,000 from grant and reserve funds dedicated to Latino ministry. Combining all of these sources of income, total revenue is budgeted for 2023 at $4.789 million. Now, if we could have the next slide. This is the expense side of the budget. As noted on this slide, operational expenses have been adjusted as appropriate to reflect actual cost experience as well as any anticipated effects of inflation. Salaries for diocesan staff include a 3.5% cost of living increase and a 6% increase in health benefits. In addition, adjustments have been made in the allocation of personnel costs across expense categories, and you may notice this when you look at the line item budget. These adjustments do not reflect any change in diocesan priorities, but rather are a more accurate reflection of how the bishop and diocesan staff spend their time based on an updated review of staff functions. As you'll see, expenses are grouped into 5 general categories in the budget, namely diocesan ministries, national and international ministries, general administration, governance, and communications. The pie chart gives an overview of how expense dollars are allocated across these cost categories. The line item expense portion of the budget document in detail is just a bit too lengthy to put on a slide, so if you want to dig into the numbers, you can do it in the convention book. As you see, diocesan ministries is the largest segment of the expense side of the budget at 57% of total expenses. This category encompasses the services that the diocese provides in support of church and ministry development and implements the strategy initiatives of church revitalization, Christian faith and leadership, and equity and justice. The next largest category is general administration, which accounts for 18% of total diocesan expense. General administration includes such things as the operating cost of the diocesan offices, the church house, the portion of staff time that's not allocated directly to programmatic support, and other general overhead expenses, which are shown in the line item budget in your booklet. National and international ministries at 11% of budgeted expenses includes diocesan contributions to the Episcopal Church and the Provincial Synod. The 2023 budget maintains Diocese of Washington's support of the Episcopal Church at the level that is expected of every member diocese, which is 15% of adjusted operating income. When I was looking at the pie chart, I said, how can we have part of the category constituting 15% and that segment only being 11%? Well, the answer is the 15% is calculated on a somewhat different basis for the income side than we show on the income side of the budget. Governance expense at 9% of total cost includes, among other things, planning and conducting the annual diocesan convention and convening meetings of the diocesan council, regional assemblies, and diocesan committees. Finally, communications at 6% of the total budget covers costs related to preparation and coordination of online publishing and other diocesan messaging to the parishes and to the general public. Altogether, expenses in the 2023 budget totaled $4.789 million, which matches the budgeted revenue, resulting in a balanced budget. I hope that this overview, as brief as it is, has given you a general understanding of the 2023 budget. And I invite you to visit the line item budget in the convention booklet if you are interested in further details. I believe that the bishop and staff have done a fine job of producing a realistic budget that advances the diocesan commitment to parish vitality and implementing the strategic plan while taking into account current economic uncertainties. Along with the Diocesan Council, the Finance Committee has reviewed and supports the 2023 proposed budget, and on behalf of the committee and of the council, I recommend its adoption. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Reports and recommendations from committees do not require a second, and so the floor is now open for discussion. Are there any items you'd like to discuss on the budget? Microphone 2.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Livingston from Calvary Church. We bring you greetings from 6th and I Street Northeast.
Thank you.
Three questions that Calvary had regarding the budget. First, as we look at page 35 in the convention booklet, under faith leadership, the third line down, there's a little bit more than 18% reduction in the campus and campus and young adult ministries. And as Bishop, you so eloquently discussed in your messaging today, as we look at the strategic goal about revitalizing our congregations to grow the Jesus movement, with the congressional revitalization, finding ways to strengthen youth and adult ministries, and the growing young initiative, that's so eloquently put, but explicitly with the reduction in the budget by that amount, we are talking the talk but not walking the walk. And so Calvary's asking for there be a zero reduction in that budget line item. The second...
Whoa. Let's do one at a time.
Okay, sure.
First of all, may I explain the rationale for that?
Absolutely.
We historically, or in my tenure, once had 2 full-time chaplains, one at Howard University and one at the University of Maryland, as well as some adjunct or part-time, mostly volunteer or parish-located ministries out of near other campuses. Both the University of Maryland and the Howard chaplaincy position are open, And Howard University is specifically, we've been in very intense conversations, or I should say intense and then lots of radio silence with Howard about what it is exactly that Howard University needs or expects from denominations like ours when we put chaplains there. And it's not clear. And we've had chaplains there, and we've partnered them with a local parish. But right now, our campus ministries are in a time of real discernment. Both chaplaincy positions are open. The model that we used before is not one that we can continue because it wasn't bearing fruit, and we can't find chaplains, and we can't supervise them in that setting. And so we're in a time of transition. Now, if you notice, there are other aspects of the budget for young adults and church planting that are specifically designed for young adult ministry, but it didn't seem like we were going to be spending that kind of staff money again in campus ministry the way we did in the past. It's not because we're not committed to it, but because we aren't, that model isn't something we're going to continue. I hope that helps in that. And I have a point of order question. If somebody wants to change the budget,
they would have to make a motion to amend the budget. It would have to be seconded and voted upon.
and if you wanted to change the budget, you would need to make a motion, and it would have to be seconded and voted upon. And I think you would have to cut money from somewhere else as you make your proposal, and that would be challenging. So I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying the decisions were made for reasons that I've tried to describe.
I think more importantly, the point
I hear you.
of bringing this up was just for this discussion we just had.
Thank you.
Yes. The second point was that there's no budget allocation or staffing for the newly formed Committee on Black Ministries.
As a point of clarification, Canon Robert Phillips is going to staff that position, or that committee. He's the canon for congregational, for leadership development and congregational health.
It's not reflected in the budget, so we're just bringing
Thank you.
bringing that to the attention of the body. And finally, there's no budget allocation or staffing for the proposed Committee on Reparations. As we all know, without dedicated staff support, committees will fail. Now, I know this resolution is going to come towards the body later today. So you can't have a budget on an entity that's not, in fact, in place yet. So for further on discussion and planning for subsequent years, that committee needs a budget line item. That's all we have from Calvary.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beatrice Dermer from Church of
I'm sorry, I haven't called upon you yet, and I just need to think for a moment. Just give me a moment, please. Thank you, Calvary. Duly noted. I'm going to call on microphone 1 now.
Hired. I wondered if you could explain, there's almost $900,000 of reductions and increases. And I wonder, is this just balancing and making it more aligned with how spending is done? It's just a lot of changes, and I wondered if you could explain a little bit.
Linda, are you referring to the salary and benefits lines? Yeah. Thank you. It's a good question. There are really 2 reasons for that, both of which, as Steve outlined. First, the expense side of the budget has been reformatted this year to more closely align with the strategic priorities in our strategic plan. And so there are fewer expense categories in the budget. And in reformatting the expense side of the budget, we also wanted to update the allocation of staff time across expense categories. And so we did that as well. And as a result of those two changes, that's what's caused sort of the shifting that you see in salaries and benefits.
Microphone 2 in the back.
Sorry about before.
That's okay.
I'm Beatrice Dermer from Church of the Epiphany. And following up, I note while the overall budget totals remain the same, the amounts dedicated to diocesan ministries is reduced by $335,000, while the overall totals for G&A, governance, and communication increased by $513,000. Similarly, for salaries, for diocesan ministries, it's $293,000 less, while it's increased for G&A, governance, and communications by $371,000. Those are significant numbers, so more clarity would be appreciated, I think.
Yeah, so the answer would be the same that I just gave to Linda, and the significant changes are a result of reformatting the expense side of the budget and updating the allocations of staff time across ministry areas.
Microphone 1.
Linda Calkins, interim rector at St. Andrew's College Park, right in the middle of University of Maryland.
Yes.
And a conversation, Bishop, that you and I had earlier this week. I want to affirm this convention that St. Andrew's is working with Hope Lutheran Church in College Park, and it is called the Humble Walk. It is neither a Lutheran nor an Episcopal ministry. It is a joint ministry, and we are doing everything that we can within our means. And as you mentioned, Bishop, to me, that there is money allocated for that ministry, that we are doing everything that we can within our means to support the Humble Walk at University of Maryland. This convention needs to be assured that that ministry will continue. It just simply is in a different format.
Thank you. Andrew, would you, I'm going to take a point of privilege. Would you mind just walking through again the restructuring of the budget? Because I feel like it's causing more of a sea change than we had anticipated.
Sure. If everyone could take a look at the expense side of the budget, which begins on page 35. You'll see the first broad category is diocesan ministries, and under that there are 3 subsections: church revitalization, faith and leadership, equity and justice. Hopefully those sound familiar, because those are the 3 key initiatives of the strategic plan. The budget did not reflect those last year. This is the first year that the budget has had those category headings. And so as we reformatted the budget, we also felt it was time to update the allocations of staff time across ministry areas. So for example, if you look at church revitalization, under salaries and benefits, you'll see that there looks like a big change. What we did is we went to every staff member and we asked, how much of your time is dedicated to church revitalization? How much of your time is dedicated to faith and leadership, to equity and justice, to general administration, to governance and communications? We then allocated each staff member's salaries across the budget areas based upon the percentages that each staff member gave us. So the budget reflects the true time that staff gives to each one of these parts of our ministry together. Does that help?
Does that help?
And let me just say that those allocations of staff time across ministry areas has not been done during my time on diocesan staff, so it has not been updated since, I would say, at least 2019. And staff has changed quite a bit over that time.
I'd also like to address again, I hope with greater clarity, the staffing and the funding for the Black Ministries Task Force and for the reparations work. For the reparations work, last year we dedicated the entire amount of monies that we received back from the wider church. You may not know, but every diocese received a rebate, if you will, of like $40,000, and we allocated all of that to the reparations task force and committee. And there is still some of that money left, and we recognize that that work will continue and will need funding and staffing, and we're prepared for that. We just didn't know exactly where it would fall, and it's a work in progress. So it's absolutely right that it needs that, and we're discerning it as we go. The Black Ministries Committee was called into being in December. It is in the process of being formed now. It also needs resources and funding and staffing, and we know that. But we feel at this juncture we're not in a position to call a new staff person, and we have some bandwidth on our team with some expertise. And that is why, for now, Canon Phillips will be staffing that newly formed committee. And as we get clarity about what resources are needed or initiatives that we would like to start, we have a pretty healthy cushion in the revitalization budget for congregations, and money can come from there. So rest assured that this is not an issue where we're calling, it's not an unfunded mandate, if you will. We're aware of that, and we would expect next year's budget to reflect that with greater clarity. And if you have any other concerns about that we're not funding or staffing things adequately, the door is open for us to walk this path together. I hope that helps a little bit. Any other questions or points of discussion regarding the budget?
I move adoption of the 2023 budget as it appears in the convention booklet and presented by Steve Gibson.
Okay. So we will now vote on the budget. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Are there any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. The 2023 budget has been adopted. I do want to I really do thank you. This is not a work that we take lightly, and I understand also that you have to take a lot of this on faith because of the complexity and the nature of our work, and I promise you our fullest diligence and accountability to you. I also am aware that congregational budgets are tight, which is one of the reasons why we did not even budget an increase at all this year, but to recognize that for many, this is a time when rebuilding your own congregational budgets is a priority. We're very grateful for those of you who continue to invest and trust and share your treasure in the collective endeavor. It means a lot. So another. Oh, good. We get to do something really wonderful right now. Not that the budget wasn't wonderful. Hang on. I know. What's the page? 20. Sorry, we're jumping around a little bit here. Okay. It's bittersweet. Today, we say farewell to Archdeacon Sue von Rottenkrantz, who is retiring after faithfully serving the Diocese of Washington since 2015, and the wider church for 30 years on both the parish and diocesan level. Sue, would you please come forward to the podium? I know. I'd like to ask Archdeacon Steve Sue to join us, please.
As the newly appointed Archdeacon, I choose not to get emotional in front of you all, so I've called on the teamwork of all of our deacons, and I would like to ask Julie Petersmeyer and Francisco Serrano from St. Margaret's to come forward for the presentation.
Good afternoon. As was mentioned, I'm Julie Petersmeyer. I am a deacon serving at St. Margaret's.
Buenas tardes, soy Francisco Serrano, diácono de la Iglesia San Margaret en DC.
When Sue came to the Diocese of Washington about 10 years ago, there were 4 deacons serving in the diocese. Of those original 4, 2 still reside and serve in our diocese. I would like to invite Terry Murphy and Susan Walker to come forward.
Cuando Sue vino para la diócesis de Washington hace más o menos 10 años, habían 4 diáconos sirviendo en la diócesis. De esos 4, 2 todavía residen y sirven en nuestra diócesis. Terry Murphy, Susan Walker están viniendo, también Kim Houston, quien vino para la diócesis de Washington como diácono desde la diócesis de Carolina del Norte.
It wasn't long after that Bishop Marianne asked Sue and others to form a task force on the diaconate to put together a discernment information program to raise up and ordain deacons in our diocese.
No mucho tiempo después, la obispa Marian le pidió a Sue y a otros que formaran un grupo de trabajo sobre el diaconado para crear un programa de discernimiento y formación para ordenar diáconos en nuestra diócesis.
After countless meetings and discussions, this task force held its first diaconal workshop in October of 2014 for individuals discerning a call to this servant ministry. From this first workshop, a first cohort of 5 was formed to begin the process of discernment and formation, and in September of 2017, they were ordained deacons. Cohort 1, please come forward.
Después de innumerables reuniones y debate, el grupo de trabajo hizo el primer taller diaconal en octubre del 2014 para individuos que estaban discerniendo el llamado al ministerio de servicio. A partir de ese taller, un primer grupo de 5 personas, se comenzó el proceso de discernimiento y formación, y en septiembre del 2017 fueron ordenados como diáconos. El grupo 1 ya se integró con nosotros.
1 year later, in September of 2018, Cohort 2 would complete their work of discernment and formation, and 12 more deacons were ordained here at the cathedral. Cohort 2, please come forward.
Un año después, en septiembre del 2018, el grupo 2 completaría su trabajo de discernimiento y formación, y otros 12 diáconos fueron ordenados aquí en Catedral Nacional de Washington. El grupo 2 está viniendo con nosotros.
In November of 2020, a third cohort finished their process, and 8 more deacons were ordained in our diocese. Cohort 3, please join us.
En noviembre del 2020, un tercer grupo terminó su proceso y 8 nuevos diáconos fueron ordenados en nuestra diócesis. El grupo 3 está viniendo con nosotros.
2 months ago, on November 12th, Cohort 4 finished their process and 10 more deacons were ordained, including our first 3 Latino deacons.
Hace solo 2 meses, el grupo 12, el 12 de noviembre del 2022, el grupo 4 terminó su proceso y 10 nuevos diáconos fueron ordenados, incluyendo nuestros primeros 3 diáconos latinos. Y el grupo 4 está viniendo también con nosotros.
As we stand here today, there are 6 more postulants and 7 nominees in discernment and formation for the diaconate. There are many people to recognize. First, Bishop Mary Ann, for her vision and commitment to this ministry. We also want to recognize the team of people who worked on developing the program, the instructors of the Diocesan Deacon School, both from within our diocese and others who come here to teach, the clergy and the congregations who support deacons in their formation, and to Sue. It is to you that we give thanks today. Your knowledge of and passion for the ministry of deacons, especially in this diocese, inspires us. We want to say thank you, we love you, and we extend to you our prayers and warmest wishes for your retirement.
Hoy, otros 6 postulantes y 7 nominados están en discernimiento y formación al diaconado. Hay muchas personas a quienes reconocer. Primero, a nuestra obispa, por su visión y compromiso con este ministerio, el equipo de personas que trabajaron para desarrollar el programa, los instructores de la escuela de diáconos, tanto en nuestra diócesis, así como otros que han venido a enseñar al clero y a las congregaciones que apoyan a los diáconos en su formación. Y queremos reconocer y darte la gracia a ti, Sue, tu conocimiento y pasión por el ministerio diaconal. Especialmente en esta diócesis. Nos inspiras. Queremos decirte gracias. Te amamos. Y oramos a Dios para que cumpla tus deseos durante tu retiro.
No, you gotta tell. Okay, yeah, you gotta tell us what you gave her.
So on behalf of all of the cohorts, we present to Archdeacon Sue with deep gratitude for her leadership in developing the diaconate in the Diocese of Washington. And it's from all the deacons you have formed, and inside are personal notes of appreciation.
We have 2 other gifts to give. So this is a cross that I hope you'll wear reminding you of your devotion to Christ, of course, but also the love that binds us together in Him. So that's for you. Then we have a present for Micah, the dog, and this is a composite of the dogs of Church House, our social media campaign. Give that to Steve. And one final word, Sue. On behalf of the diocese and in my role as bishop, I am proud to name you Archdeacon Emeritus of the Diocese of Washington. So today is only farewell for now. Not only have we heard that you have guest rooms in your house in South Carolina, we expect to see you on special occasions here because we love you. Thank you, Sue.
I was told I would have to say something, so I was also encouraged to write it down. So I'll do my best here. I've had the great privilege for the last 44 years, actually, to walk with people of all ages as they discovered and matured in their faith journey and discerned their vocation as Christian people. And all of this has been within the Episcopal Church. Children's ministry, youth ministry, camp ministry, short-term missions, retreats, developing servant leaders, both lay and ordained. This has been the greatest privilege of my life. To walk with people in their discipleship has given me more than I could ever have given to them. I have been greatly blessed. My first visit to Washington, D.C. was in 1999. I walked onto the close and into this building for the first time, and I was in awe. You see, I'd watched this building on Christmas morning for years with my mother on the couch. On Christmas morning, we would sit and watch the service from here that was broadcast by our local television station. My mom was a church geek, and I am too. And I never thought I would ever be in this place, live here, or do ministry in this diocese. 10 years ago, Jeff McKnight at St. Dunstan's invited me to be on their staff, just 3 miles down the road from this building. And I believed I would be in the diocese for only a short time and move on. But then I offered time to Bishop Mary Ann. You might not want to do that. I offered time to Bishop Mary Ann to work on a task force, and here we are today with all these people who said yes. They're all amazing. None of this ministry has been done alone, and for that I am extremely grateful. And while you honor me today, there have always been others working with me. And I don't want to name a lot of people, but I do need to name Joymel Gonzalez, who was phenomenal. He's one of the most brilliant persons I've ever worked with. And without that, without him, we would not have Latino deacons, which I am extremely grateful for. Steve, we've known each other from youth ministry days, so I won't tell you any stories today, but I think the deacons in the diocese are in very good hands with him, and he will bring gifts that I don't have to this ministry. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm grateful for those people. I'm grateful for the task force, which included Terry and Susan. It's not about me, though. It's always about working together as followers of Jesus. I'm grateful for the opportunities this role has given me and the amazing people I have met and worked with in this diocese. For the amazing lessons and learnings I've had here. I've grown much since coming to Washington. Closing, I want to say a few thank yous. First, to this diocese. You are an amazing gift, a great gift to this church, and you have much to offer and teach. Your hope, your diversity, your willingness to take on some very difficult issues. and most importantly, your desire to follow Jesus and make a difference in this time and place because of that. To the deacons of this diocese, keep growing. Keep going strong. Remember to work together for the greater good, pushing the faithful to do the work of Jesus, helping all to go deeper on that charity to justice continuum, as it is by our actions that they'll know we are Christians. To my colleagues on staff, wherever you are around here, you are amazing. I will miss you very much. Diocese of Washington, this group of people is awesome, incredible, dedicated, gifted, love to have fun, and work incredibly hard to support you and your congregations. And above all, they are passionate followers of Jesus. And lastly, to Marianne, thank you for taking the risk to invite me to be on your staff. We've known each other for a long time. Sorry. Can't see. I never thought I've had the honor of sharing ministry with you day to day in the diocese. The Diocese of Washington, again, you have been greatly blessed. I've been around this church for a long time, and I've worked for a few bishops. You have a bishop, we have a bishop, who works hard every day for you. She's wise, always learning and growing, has great integrity, and yes, I think her brain continues to process even while she sleeps. But above all, she loves Jesus, and she loves you. I hope I have done that as well. Love Jesus and love you. For if we do that, we can and will change the world. Thank you.
While the rest of us gain our composure, we are going to watch a video that describes some of the fruits of the Tending Our Soil initiative.
This work is getting tough. Right, the first year you kind of know who you are, look at the neighborhood, and now you're actually doing the work. Now you're actually trying to make change.
I actually love the idea of tending our soil in this particular moment in time. As we sort of are emerging from COVID, sort of looking around, and we're given this gift of re-examining what we do and why. Now that we have this brave new world and this blank slate, it's a great time to inventory who we are, who's in the community around us, what God's calling us to do, and what that's going to look like for St. Peter's in 22, 23, 24, and beyond.
We don't want to seem pushy. We don't want to be braggarts. We don't want to be lumped in with people who follow Jesus in ways that are completely antithetical to our understanding of what it means to be Christian.
So something that we have done already that's been really useful is looking at our history and looking at what things are core to our identity. We practice our unique traditions like outside processions. Those things are important in showing that we are a place where anybody can come and pray, and that we show our faith outwardly, not just inwardly inside our church and our chapels and our nave.
We don't use our church outside. I was just saying this actually at our lunch table, like we don't use the outside space of our church. We just always thought like everything should be inside. So like, yes, there's a welcome table, but you have to come through the door to get to the welcome table, right? So now there's this very bright sign that says, hey, you can come worship with us. Here's how we do it. Here's when we do it. Here's the time we do it. And like, that's such a big difference. Like, it's just a different way of us announcing ourselves in our community.
Yeah, so we decided that what we wanted to work on is having a funded marketing committee. So we have not had that, and I think sometimes marketing is not viewed favorably within a church setting. But one of the things we wanted to do was really become part of the fabric of our community. And we think we do a pretty good job with people who are inside the church, but less so with the community.
I think it's re-energized a lot of the congregation into sort of looking at themselves through the lens of how we can be more involved within our community. So St. John's is almost at the main crossroads in Olney, Maryland, and so it has always given itself that identity of being like, wow, we were at this crossroads parish, except that had fallen by the wayside. Instead of how do we minister to or in, they're starting to really look at the dynamic of with and being within the community and seeing themselves as a part of where the parish has no walls and that it's really the community is our soil.
Congregational vitality does not mean numbers. It does not mean more people necessarily. It might. Congregational vitality means a healthy, growing parish that is living into its call from God, living into its faith, and serving the community as God has called it to in its neighborhood.
By having Tending Our Soil, for example, start us with the story and the fundamental importance of relationship. That was something that, you know, in all likelihood we wouldn't have done in any other way. If we'd had the best of intentions, it would have been up on the list of things to do. But it would have never gained kind of the primacy and, in a real sense, kind of the sacred time that was required to do it well.
I'm hoping that it revitalizes our congregation. I hope that people find a new way of worshiping, people find a new way of spirituality, looking at the big picture and saying, how can we bring this into our community? We've kind of left our community behind. The face of the church have changed, but that any new member coming in can say, oh my God, this is definitely a home for God's people.
Thank you all, and thank you all to all the participating congregations represented. Just as a point of note for anyone who's still thinking it might be of value for you community, we were starting to recruit and accept applications in the spring for the last cohort of Tending Our Soil, which will begin in earnest in September. So please speak with any of us, but in particular Anne-Marie Jeffrey, as someone standing there, right there, with, and also an Okay, we have two Tending Our Soil representatives who are here to speak with you. April 21st is the time we'd love to have your applications in. Okay, now we're going to go to the second ballot. Results from the second ballot. Ms. Deo Dillard is going to leap to the podium. Well, maybe walk carefully to the podium.
All right. Results of the balloting for alternate deputies to General Convention. Clerical deputies, 4 to be elected. The Reverend Susan Fitz, let me start by saying 117 clergy votes, 59 needed to elect. 124 lay votes, 63 needed to elect. Reverend Susan Fitz, 70 clergy votes, 91 lay votes, for a total of 161. The Reverend David Waycaster, 89 clergy votes, 67 lay votes, for a total of 156. The Reverend Sheila McJilton, 59 clergy votes, 68 lay votes, for a total of 127. So only 3 were elected: the Reverend Fitz, the Reverend Waycaster, and the Reverend McJilton. The next ballot will contain the names of the Reverend Joan Crittenden and the Reverend Emily Lloyd. For lay alternate deputy, 4 to be elected. Clergy votes 117, 59 to elect. Lay votes 122, 62 needed to elect. Ms. Erica Gilmore, 107 clergy, 115 lay votes, 222 total. Ms. Cheryl Peterson, 100 clergy votes, 111 lay votes, for a total of 211. Ms. Andrea Pringle, 99 clergy votes, 110 lay votes, for a total of 209. And Mr. Jason Creighton, 71 clergy votes, 96 lay votes, for a total of 167 votes. So all 4 are elected: Ms. Gilmore, Ms. Peterson, Ms. Pringle, and Mr. Creighton. So there will be a 3rd ballot.
Thank you.
We will now broadcast the next ballot for clerical alternative deputy to General Convention. You will vote for 1. I would remind the convention that you should be at polling session 2023 ADG C. Don't forget the C. And on the ballot, you will see Reverend Emily Lloyd and Reverend Joan Crittenden. You vote for 1. If you do not see the ballot on your screen, please click the browser refresh button, and the ballot should appear. Please, once you've made your selection, remember that you cannot change your vote after you hit submit. Please vote now. Does anyone need more time to vote?
We're good to go?
We'll have one more minute.
Votes are still being tabulated. 1 more minute. If you want to stretch in this minute, feel free, because we're going to be moving into resolutions next.
The ballot is now closed. Thank you.
Please take your seats. Because the time has come for us to take up the resolutions before us, and I call on the Secretary to provide instructions on how we will consider and vote on resolutions.
Resolutions are in your convention booklet starting on page 67 and will be shared on the screen as they are being considered by the convention. The first member to speak on the resolution shall be the primary sponsor or the agreed-upon designee, who may speak up to 5 minutes on the resolution. Once the resolution has been seconded and the floor is open for discussion, others wishing to speak to the resolution should move to one of the microphones, and you will be called to speak in order. Amendments to the resolution must be submitted in writing before being proposed from the microphone. There are amendment forms in your convention booklet following the text of the resolutions. If you have an amendment to propose, please bring the written amendment to the table to my right in north transept, where members of the diocesan staff are waiting. This will enable us to display the amendment on the screen after you've submitted the amendment in writing. Please get in line at the microphone. After the amendment is seconded, the debate will be limited to consideration of that amendment only. Please remember that when one amendment is pending, you may propose an amendment to the amendment, but you may not propose a separate amendment to the main resolution. Once all amendments have been discussed and voted upon, we will return to voting on the resolution itself with any adopted amendments.
As Keith said, the first member to speak on a resolution will be the primary sponsor or the agreed-upon designee. No one may speak more than twice in the same debate or longer than 3 minutes at any one time, except that the primary sponsor or designee may speak for up to 5 minutes the first time and 3 minutes the second time. If you wish to speak a second time, please wait until others at the mics have had their turn.
Thank you. I now call for consideration of the first resolution.
Thank you, Bishop Marianne. The Resolution Committee has reported 2 resolutions that were filed before the 60-day deadline prescribed by the Convention's Rules of Order. The first resolution, towards reparation in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington, will be introduced by its sponsor, the Reverend Peter Jarrett Shell.
Microphone 2.
Good afternoon. Peter Jarrett Shell, Calvary Church. I'm presenting the resolution towards reparations in the Episcopal Diocese of Washington. This resolution is necessary because the diocese has a long history of knowingly and willfully participating in anti-black racism for the benefit of its white membership. During the era of chattel slavery, congregations were funded through the colonial-era tobacco tax, garnered from slave plantations. Rectors, vestry members, and most large givers of record were themselves enslavers. Church buildings were built using enslaved labor, some of which are in use now. Assets piled up for this participation in slavery continue to operate in the diocese today. After emancipation, patterns of participation in anti-black racism continued into the present moment. Black congregations saw their assets and property taken and transferred to white congregations. Our congregations used and continue to use formation and Christian education curriculum that center and privilege a white perspective. Churches pursued investment and real estate strategies that furthered trends of gentrification and displacement in the district. And that's not even a full account of the harms in which our diocese has participated. These practices materially and spiritually harmed both the black membership of this diocese and the larger black community of this area, while materially and emotionally benefiting white congregations. That was our past. That is the pattern of our present, and it will be our future unless we make a change. Reparations are one part of the necessary change. Reparations are not a panacea for racism. On their own, reparations will not establish racial justice. But reparations are necessary for any project of racial justice that hopes to succeed. Reparations are necessary because, while money cannot solve all problems, wealth and the lack of it conditions every problem in this nation. The vast disparities of wealth between whites and blacks have a profound negative impact on the health, safety, and autonomy of the black community in this area. That impacts black families, it impacts black churches. There is no path towards justice that does not face this inequality head on. Reparations are necessary because, as Jesus taught us, where your treasure is, there your heart will be too. Until we are willing to put our money where our mouth is, the Almighty will regard all our pious endorsements of racial justice as just so much empty wind. To be sure, the question of reparations includes a lot of thorny questions within it. To whom are reparations owed? What assets, both financial and otherwise, are involved? How will they be distributed? These questions deserve serious and thoughtful response. The black community itself represents the body best qualified and most justified to provide answer. Therefore, this resolution would convene a majority black working group comprised of leaders within the diocese who, in consultation with local black leaders outside the diocese, would draft a brass tax reparations program for this diocese's consideration in 2 years. Much has been uncovered and much told, but there is much more to learn and reveal. And therefore, this resolution would also convene an education working group that would continue researching and sharing the history of this with the diocese at large. For 128 years, this convention and diocese has held assets piled up through racialized plunder.
30 seconds.
Past time to make it right. Therefore, I move that this convention adopt the resolution towards reparations in the Diocese of Washington. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second? We have a second. The floor is now open for discussion. Just a word of process. Given the length of the resolution, we're going to work through it section by section, starting first with comments on the resolution overall. And then we'll move through each section of the resolution for discussion. So the floor is open now for the discussion on the resolution overall. Microphone 2.
David Waycaster, Grace Church, Georgetown. I rise in support of this resolution calling our diocese to work toward repentance and reparations. I believe the church in the 21st century is called to facilitate and build right relationships. Indeed, the church is among the last institutions in our country deliberately bringing together all sorts and conditions of people. The facilitating and building of right relationships among people of diverse backgrounds is a primary way the church lives into Jesus' command that we love our neighbor. Indifference to the lived experiences of our African American siblings is a barrier to being in right relationship. Ignorance of our country's history of chattel slavery, Jim Crow, and segregation is a barrier to being in right relationship. Unawareness of the ways in which our diocese has participated in and benefited from racism, anti-blackness, and white supremacy is a barrier to being in right relationship. This resolution is a step toward breaking down such barriers, telling the truth about our history as a diocese, and figuring out ways to intentionally build up and invest in the African American community are vital pieces of the work of repentance and reparation. Therefore, I urge you to join me in supporting this resolution. Let us commit ourselves and our resources to beginning the righting and repairing of relationships.
Thank you. Microphone one.
Michelle Morgan, Rector, St. Mark's, Capitol Hill. I rise to support this resolution as well because it's a deeper conversation, and I can't speak to the Black experience, but what I can say is that St. Mark's is deeply committed to the cessation of gun violence in this country. And after 7 years, and I want to commend Peter's opening statement, and he mentioned safety. And I stand in the hallway of St. Mark's, and the door creaks open, and someone walks in who's had the worst day of their life and wants to come and be with others. And again and again and again, I see the same people who are mostly women of poor neighborhoods all over this country, and year one, they came in with a picture of their son. And year two, they came in with a picture of their son and their nephew. And then the third year, they come in with a third picture. And then I'm standing next to them when they're talking about their dead because they've got a fourth picture. Safety in Black communities and gun violence are deeply, deeply connected. And for us not to say we want to have a conversation as Christians, in my mind, is immoral. And I owe it to my community that is convicted for the cessation of gun violence. And that's why I stand to say, let's talk about this and let's move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone two.
Good afternoon. I'm Gail Fisher-Stewart, a member of the Reparations Task Force, and I speak in support of the resolution. Pieces of silver, pieces of gold, who will pay reparations on my soul? Those words are from the 1970 song by Gil Scott-Heron and point to the race-based trauma that damages the soul. We don't talk about race-based trauma, but it exists. It exists in society, in our schools, and in our church that says one thing and does another. Respect the dignity of every human being. Black folk don't want to admit it, not about the beloved church. We don't want to be accused of playing the race card or making white people uncomfortable. Yet every time I walk into this sacred space, this safe space, this sanctuary, this house of all people, but it could be any church with iconography. But here I am met with the statue of George Washington, an enslaver. There is Abraham Lincoln, who, if he could have saved this country without freeing the enslaved, he would have. There's also the ghost of the Lee Jackson windows, which, if we are honest, like other Confederate memorials placed in the early 1900s, its installation was an act of terrorism. The first bishop of the Diocese of Maryland, Thomas Claggett, who enslaved people in Prince George's County, Maryland, is buried here. And then there is the crypt of President Woodrow Wilson to my right, whose father was a founder of the Presbyterian Church of the Confederacy. Wilson resegregated the federal government in the city and hosted a viewing at the White House of the racist movie Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith. One quotation from a history book written by Wilson stated, and I quote, "The white man was roused by mere instinct of self-preservation. Now at last had sprung into existence a great Ku Klux Klan, a veritable empire of the South, to protect the Southern country," end quote. And as an educator, he wanted that movie to be used to teach the history of this country. And we are afraid of AP history for African Americans. Yes, there are icons in the sacred place to Oscar Romero, Rosa Parks, Bishop John Walker, And Matthew Shepard, the victim of homosexual hate, is also buried here. But none of these cancel out the others. They do not segregate. They do not negate the fact that those who deny the humanity of Black people are enshrined here, given places of honor here in this house of prayer for all people. Who will pay reparations on my soul, on the souls of all God's people of ebony grace who call themselves Episcopalians? We are responsible for the cure, the care of the souls. Therefore, I ask you to pass the resolution to repair the damage.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak in general to the resolution before we move kind of section by section? Okay, we're going to move now to the section 1, apology, repentance, and reparations. Are there any discussion or amendments for section 1? Microphone 2.
Bishop Timothy Cole, Christchurch, Georgetown. You have the amendment already, and if it could be put up on the screen, I'll speak to it.
Okay.
Thank you. Bishop, Convention delegates, this proposed amendment is a friendly amendment that seeks good transparency in the coming process. In the light of the significance of the issue, we feel it's very important that parishioners across the diocese are able to listen to and observe the discussions of the committees that will work on it. It will be important to understand the reasoning, the ethical thought, and the theology that is being brought to bear in the process. We had hoped that the Diocesan Task Force would accept this amendment and include it in the actual resolution, but they felt that this transparency would likely burden the work of the committee. All I would say is that if transparency is burdensome, it's a burden worth bearing in such an important discussion. The key element of this amendment is the last point, section 6(1)(e). Even if all else were rejected, this provision alone would answer the main concern. We all record and post our services, forums, and many of our church information groups online. We believe that the diocese has the audiovisual and technological capability to accomplish such recordings, especially given the quick study and accomplishment of such capability that the recent pandemic has necessitated for us all. We don't think that this would be burdensome at all. The task force also feel that while the key meetings of the diocese, like the convention and the regional gatherings, are recorded and posted, other groups are not. And this is true. But we would argue that this particular work is too important to be left to be conducted behind closed doors. And like all the key gatherings of the diocese should be available to all parishioners who wish to observe it. All our vestries are public meetings that can be attended and observed by any parishioner, and these groups should not be any different in our view. In short, we hope the Convention will support this amendment. There's nothing to be lost and a very great deal to be gained by making these vital discussions open and transparent to the whole diocese. Not to do this could undermine the process and allow misunderstanding to weaken support for whatever conclusions the working groups end up proposing for Convention's approval in a year's time.
30 seconds.
I move that the Convention adopt this amendment as one that will in fact strengthen and deepen the work that the resolution sets in progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second for the amendment to the resolution? Thank you. Now we will now discuss the proposed amendment to the resolution. Microphone 2.
Thank you, Bishop Marianne. Maria Kane, Rector, St. Paul's, Waldorf. I would like to speak wholeheartedly against this amendment. It is not a friendly amendment. It is an amendment that strikes more as supervision than transparency. We do not require diocesan council, standing committee, finance committee to record or publish in advance their meeting proceedings. We do not demand detailed notes as well. All of those meetings are equally important, for they involve major decisions, including financial matters. In addition, when we completed the strategic planning process, we did not necessitate, nor did anyone ask for the record, that there be such detailed advance notice or notes. Furthermore, the whole point of one of the points of this process is to restore the power and balance in which there has consistently for 400 years been the gaze of white people, especially white men, on the bodies and intellects of black people in America. Trust black people. As a black woman, trust the intellect that we bring to the table, that we know what we are doing. It is far overdue for us to stop having to have white people feel comfortable about so-called proceedings. If you want to be comfortable, I would recommend that one does their own internal work. In addition, while this may not have been the amendment's author's intent to supervise or undermine the intellect of black people, it is nonetheless the effect. And part of the process of reparation is moving past so-called notions of someone's intent and taking ownership for actions. Thus, I ask that we vote when the time comes against an amendment that only seeks to further instill the vestiges of white supremacy and the white gaze. Thank you.
No applause, please. No applause. Microphone 2.
Thank you. I'm Jack Hadler. I am a priest of this diocese since 1973, and I attend St. George's in D.C. From 2002 to 2009, I was co-chair of the task force on...
Excuse me, Jack, I just need to know, are you speaking for or against the amendment?
I'm speaking against.
Okay, thank you.
From 2002 to 2009, I was co-chair of the task force on racial reconciliation with Allison St. Louis as co-chair until she moved to Hartford. I know many of you have met Allison from the clergy conference. And then with Janice Robinson, then rector, now the late Janice Robinson, then rector.
Jack, you have like 50 seconds. You better get going. Oh, you have 2 minutes. Sorry. You have 2 minutes. My apologies. I was watching the wrong clock.
I'm sorry.
That task force had very little support from the bishop or the council, although they authorized this. And this task force died shortly after I left in 2009. So it's great that this current task force has gotten the attention that it's gotten. One of the major learnings from this was that never underestimate the anxiety of racial conversation. Never underestimate it. And therefore, it is very important that dialogue or that conversation takes place in a safe and trusting place. To have other people gazing upon that conversation is to silence the folk that are having it, whether white or black. And so enough trust needs to be established for that to happen. The last thing I'd say is that the work of a committee, the fruit of a committee, comes out from their final product not from the blood, sweat, and tears and the vulnerability of those who are doing that work.
30 seconds.
And therefore, I agree with Maria that the gaze of other people, whether white or black, upon this group will silence folk. And as we heard Bishop Sutton say, give testimony of a woman who spoke to him in confidentiality about the effect of race upon her family.
Time. Please yield the microphone.
We are debating the amendment or discussing the amendment to the amendment. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to it? Seeing no one come before the microphone, we're going to do this by raising of hands. All those in favor of the amendment to the resolution, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. And are there any abstentions? The amendment fails. We are going back now to debating the resolution, the first section of the resolution, apology, repentance, and reparation. Microphone 2.
Hello, I'm Charles Hendricks, lay delegate from St. Bartholomew's, Laytonsville, and I submitted a proposed amendment, which I hope is available. It relates to number 3, sentence 3 in section 1, and it simply adds, I guess, 7 words for the purpose of clarity and to avoid misunderstanding. And you see the words where it says 400 years of abuse in the United States and its colonial antecedents. And the reason for this is simply to avoid the danger that opponents of this resolution might accuse the Episcopal Church of not being able to count. And the first 2 sentences refer to the history of the diocese. The third sentence refers to 400 years of abuse that can be traced back to 1619, which was before the settlement of Maryland, but not before that was in fact the introduction of slavery into British America. So the purpose is to clarify that here in sentence 3, we're referring to 400 years outside the diocese, and in fact, I hope that this is viewed favorably as broadening our commitment for reparations, not simply to harms done directly by Anglicans or Episcopalians, but to the harms of racism as we can try to overcome them. So I hope it will be considered a friendly amendment. Certainly, the purpose is to avoid misunderstanding and add clarity. I move the amendment.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second? Thank you. We now move to discussion of the proposed amendment, adding the words "in the United States and its colonial antecedents." Is there discussion? I don't think anyone's moving to the microphone, so I think we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay. And abstentions? The amendment is approved, and that language will be added to the resolution. So we're back now, continuing section 1, if need be, apology, repentance, and reparations. Is there any other discussion on the first section? Moving then to the second section, Committee on Diocesan Reparations. Is there any discussion in particular on the Committee on Reparations section of the resolution? Moving then to the third, is there discussion on the Policy Working Group section of the amendment? Moving on, discussion on sections 4 or 5, the Policy Working Group and termination. Education Working Group, excuse me, and termination. Are you moving to the microphone again, sir? Yes, okay.
Please correct me if I'm out of order and didn't move fast enough.
Name again, sir, sorry. I need you to identify yourself.
Re-identify myself, yes. I spoke before. My name is Charles Hendricks. I'm a lay delegate at St. Bartholomew's, Laytonsville.
Thanks.
And I noticed in looking at the two versions of the resolution, the one that was presented before the January 12th seminar and the one presented today, that a change has been made relative to the membership of the Policy Working Group. The original version had required that at least 5 of the 8 members must be African American. I guess black is the word that was used. And the current version adds some additional language that specifies a majority of the total, including ex officio members. That raises a question in my mind. Do the ex officio members have a vote in this body? And that is why that was changed? Or was there some other reason why those additional words were added?
I'll have the Chancellor speak to a moment on the ex officio question, but I'm wondering if the Reverend Jarrett Schell would mind coming to the microphone to describe the process of adaptation of the resolution through the hearings. But regarding the ex officio question, Chancellor?
Yeah, as a matter of policy, the ex officio members would not be voting members of the committee, but would rather serve without vote.
Thank you. Microphone 2.
Yes, so there were additional changes to the resolution that came about based on response from the resolution hearings. This change was to ensure that the membership of the body, the total body, would remain majority black apart from considerations of who are ex officio members. It is true that that wouldn't have an effect on the voting of the body, but as came through clearly in our discussion about the proposed amendment regarding quote-unquote transparency, the integrity of the body to have an open discussion is extremely important, and to maintain the entire space, including both voting and discussion as a majority black space, is, I think, necessary for the success of this body's work.
Thank you. Other discussion points? I see that no further members are asking to be recognized, and thus we will now vote on this resolution. All those in favor of the resolution, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Are there abstentions? Thank you. The resolution has been approved.
We will now consider.
No, we're not. We're gonna take a break. We're gonna take a break. So we're gonna take a 5-minute break, and then we'll take up the next resolution. I'm going to start bringing you back, folks. Let's come on back. We'll bring this convention home. Please take your seats. We're going to show another video. You don't want to miss this one. This is showcasing the work of St. John's Norwood and their ministry to address food insecurity in Montgomery County.
When COVID hit, we were looking around for things, as so many people were, and what could we do? And we started small. We started giving hand sanitizer to bus drivers and starting mask making efforts and all that. But we realized, of course, that these were Band-Aids, and the COVID laid bare how raw the food insecurity issues in our community were. And we felt that we had to do something so much bigger. So picture this, August 2020, right? It's our first distribution. We're in at the rescue squad in the parking lot. We don't know who's going to come or what it's going to look like. And we got 100 families came in. We just were thrilled, excited, overwhelmed. It was just something. We just didn't really know what we were doing, but we did know that we were doing something right. And then it started growing. And we every week we had cars around the block.
And down the street.
Hire. At one point we had it all the way down to downtown Bethesda. We hired 4 police officers. The need was that great. People would wait 2 hours to get food. We thought it might last 6 months or something like that. And here we are 2.5 years later. And we were up to weekly serving 640 families.
We've moved now to a model where we have people come in by appointment. They come in and they sit with us and they talk to us and we learn more about them and what their needs are, because food insecurity is just the tip of the iceberg.
Our recipients have become, people that we know by name, and we know their stories. We've been working with them, and we're really working now into thinking about other services that we can really help them.
We also discovered that we were giving people who yearned to be of assistance, who yearned to help others, who yearned to care for their neighbor, a place where they could come and do it. And literally, people would walk up to us on the parking lot at the Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad, where we did the food distribution every Friday. They'd say, "What are you doing?" And when we explained it to them, they were astonished, and they said, "How can I help? How can I help?" And people signed up, and they would come, and they'd help us pack and distribute food. And we still have many of those early volunteers, and many more from other faith communities, from the neighborhood, because they liked what was going on there. And that, to me, was one of the greatest gifts, is that we were helping to create disciples in love of neighbor at the same time that we're feeding people. So it's a fantastically fulfilling ministry. If I were to leave one thought with anyone listening to this discussion, it would be, don't be afraid. I think that's the thing Jesus said most often in the Bible. Do not be afraid. There are times when you have to take a leap of faith. Not foolishly, but you have to take a leap of faith. And we did. And if you are moving in the direction the Spirit wants you to go, it will succeed.
And it can be a wild ride. I gotta tell you, this is not faith. When you open that up, it's like a fire hose, and it is exciting, but it's scary.
It's like riding a wave.
It's scary, but it's there's nothing like it. Nothing like it, I can tell you.
Next, we will take up Resolution 2. Resolution 2 is entitled On Planting Trees for Special Occasions, which will be introduced by Abbot McCartney.
Good afternoon. I'm Abbot McCartney, St. John's Church, Lafayette Square, and a member of the Diocesan Creation Care Committee. Caring for God's creation is the Episcopal Church's calling. In response to that calling, we wish to introduce Resolution Number 2 on the planting of trees to encourage parishes to plant trees in special celebrations. The purpose of the resolution is to help focus our minds, our hearts, and our actions on better outcomes for this planet of ours, our island home. Planting trees is a symbolic act. Hopefully it will be a constant reminder to us to act more responsibly to the care of all God's creation. Planting trees has many benefits for reducing pollution and carving out green spaces for rest, reflection, and recreation. It also contributes to environmental justice for all. There is a nexus between environmental stressors and poor behavior and mental and health outcomes. Thus, planting trees will respond to the first great commandment to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind. Loving God includes caring for all of God's creation, including the natural world. It also respects the second great commandment to love our neighbor as ourselves. We love our neighbors from around the world when we act to safeguard our common home. I move the adoption of Resolution 2 on the planting of trees to celebrate special occasions.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. The floor is now open for discussion on Resolution 2. Is there any discussion? Microphone 1.
Hi, I'm Mary Siebold, deacon at St. Dunstan's Church and a member of the Creation Care Committee, and I have an amendment that I would like to submit.
Please. To the desk over there. It's going to take a moment as we type in the resolution, the amendments. You can see it on the screen, so just hang on a sec. Okay.
So this amendment reads, the convention invites the Creation Care Committee to report annually to the convention the number of trees planted by parishes to celebrate special occasions. And this simply allows the churches of the diocese, the committee, and the diocese itself to measure the success of our participation in this worldwide program.
Thank you. Is there a second to the amendment? Second. Any discussion on the amendment? Anyone want to speak to it? All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Okay. All those opposed? Thank you. Any abstentions? Okay, the amendment is approved and will be added to the full body of the resolution. Is there any other discussion on the resolution? All those in favor of the resolution as it's been amended, please raise your hand. Great. Hands down, all those opposed? Abstention? The resolution passes. Thank you very much. I now call Ms. Stillard back for the teller's report.
Results of the, hold your applause, third and final ballot. For lay alternate to General Convention, 1 to be elected. Clergy votes 104, needed to elect 53. Lay votes 118, needed to elect 60. Reverend Joan Crittenden, 42. Clergy votes 48, lay votes, total of 90. The Reverend Emily Lloyd, 59 clergy votes, 62 lay votes for a total of 121. The Reverend Emily Lloyd is elected.
While you're applauding, I wonder if you would extend your applause for all those who put their names forward for election but were not elected, but to thank them for their willingness to serve and to assure them of our love and desire to find yet another place of service for you in the vineyard of God's kingdom. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Okay, we've got a big job ahead of us, so we're going to walk through now, led by Tony Coe, the Committee on Constitution and Canons report. Right, and that is you want to turn now to page 39. This is the last big item, and there are 5 motions coming from this committee. So just hold on to your hats. It's going to be a ride.
Good afternoon. I know it's the end of the day. We will try and do this very quickly. The Committee on Constitution and Canons has 5 items with proposed amendments to the Constitution and Canons this year. 3 items are procedural. They are directly or indirectly resulted from the emergency pandemic experiences. 1 item is technical and conforming, and only 1 item is substantive. That has to do with the restructuring of the Standing Committee. The text of the proposed amendments for all 5 items were introduced and published last year in the convention booklet for the 127th Annual Convention. First, the committee proposes an amendment to the Constitution to authorize remote electronic meetings, and amendments to the canons to carry out the authorization. These amendments are a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The item was discussed in the report last year, and it was also published at the annual meeting, January 29, 2022. The second item the committee will propose is an amendment to the Constitution to authorize an expedited amendment process in the case of emergencies. This amendment is also a response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This amendment would authorize the convention to amend the Constitution without taking a second vote of approval in the following year, if the convention determines that an emergency exists that requires the extraordinary action. This item was also discussed in the report of the annual meeting in 2021, and the text of the proposed amendments were published at the annual meeting in 2022. Then third, the committee will propose an amendment to the Constitution to provide for a waiver of any procedural requirement relating to the conduct of a committee meeting of the annual meeting of the convention. The procedures are conducted are governed by 4 sets of rules. So we have a very complex system of 4 sets of rules, and something as simple as getting a unanimous consent and making it work properly within those 4 rules. This is the purpose of this particular amendment. Then fourth, the committee will propose technical and conforming amendments to both the Constitution and the canons relating to the use of the term disability. And these amendments will remove references to disability as a reason to apply certain provisions and clarify that the intended meaning of those provisions apply to the situation of when a person is unable to perform the duties of the office. Then fifth, the committee will propose amendments to the Constitution and the canons to restructure the Standing Committee to provide for regional assemblies to nominate an individual from the respective regions to stand for election to the Standing Committee at the annual meetings of the Convention. So the first item, the remote electronic meetings. The COVID-19 pandemic ended in-person meetings, such as the annual meetings of the Convention, and required compliance with certain federal, state, and local laws. Organizations and corporations throughout the country face similar kinds of legal and business problems, including the lack of clear authorization to hold certain kinds of meetings and conduct certain kinds of business. The proposed amendment to the Constitution provides the express authorization for an option to hold meetings of the Convention as remote electronic meetings. The proposed amendment to the canons provides for the Convention to make rules of order for remote electronic meetings of the Convention and expressly authorizes the diocesan committees, councils, and other entities to hold remote electronic meetings. Therefore, the Committee on the Constitution and Canons moves, 1, the adoption of a resolution to amend the Constitution of the diocese, with this being the first of two conventions to approve it, and 2, the adoption of a resolution amending the canons as follows.
Thank you. Motions from a committee do not need a second. Therefore, the floor is open for discussion on this particular motion. All those in favor of the Committee on Constitution and Canons first resolution recommendation, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
All right, the next item has to do with the expedited constitutional amendment process. So Article 13 of our diocesan constitution provides for the exclusive process for amending the Constitution. It requires the amendment to be in writing, approved by a majority vote at convention, for the approved text to be sent to each parish, and then a second majority vote of approval at the following meeting of the convention. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated that emergencies of long durations can create unforeseen problems in a convention acting as a body quickly. The requirement that there are two successive votes of approval means as a practical matter that it takes 2 years to amend the Constitution. The proposed expedited process to amend the Constitution on a single vote at a single meeting is reserved only for the most pressing emergencies requiring immediate action. The process is not to be used as just a matter of convenience. The expedited process amendment has safeguards to protect the process from being misused. For any proposed amendment under the expedited process, the bishop would be responsible for providing to the vestry of each parish before a meeting of the convention, 1, a notice of the amendment and a description of the emergency to be addressed, and 2, the written text of the proposed amendment. Before the proposed amendment could be considered at the meeting of the convention, the members of the convention would formally decide whether there is an applicable emergency. To use the expedited process, the convention would be required to pass a separate resolution stating that the convention determines that there is an emergency that necessitates the use of the expedited process. The vote would require a 67% supermajority of members for approval. If the resolution is approved, the convention would consider the proposed constitutional amendment under all usual procedures, including any amendments proposed from the floor. The final vote of the approval of the proposed amendment would also require a 67% supermajority of members. Generally, the COVID-19 pandemic was an unanticipated emergency. It's very difficult to accurately predict the exact nature of future emergencies. Some possible scenarios include another pandemic, a climate change-related crisis, a natural or human-made disaster, including mass terrorist attacks or war, other issues, such as an emergency related to a requirement from the General Convention that needs immediate implementation, that is less than 2 years, or an emergency authorization from a state or federal law relating to an exception applicable to religious organizations, perhaps maybe to the benefit of the religious organization, that needs clarification by the diocese in order to apply. All of these scenarios seem unlikely, and hopefully the expedited emergency process will not be needed for decades. Therefore, the Committee on the Constitution and Canons moves the adoption of amendment to the Constitution of the Diocese, this being the first of 2 conventions to approve it.
Again, there is no second needed to put this amendment before you. Is there discussion? All those in favor of the proposed amendment to the Constitution, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Abstentions? See a few opposed abstentions. Okay, the amendment is approved, and we'll see you back next year to take it up again.
Next is the unanimous consent request. Okay. The formal rules of procedures are indispensable for the meetings of the convention. The rules are intended to aid the efficiency and productivity of the meetings. The rules should never impede the procedural conduct of the meeting when all members are in agreement. The proposed constitutional amendment provides that any participant of the convention, which by the definition in the Constitution itself includes voting members of the convention and persons who have seat and voice, may make a unanimous consent request that waives any procedural requirement that relates to the conduct of the meeting. The obvious safeguard for this proposed amendment is that any agreement would need to be truly unanimous. Any single participant may object to the request on the basis of any reason. Although a unanimous consent request under the proposed amendment may be made at any time during the meeting, it is very useful at the end of the day of a meeting, and particularly to finish up business quickly. But it would apply at any time throughout the meeting. A motion to suspend the rules or a motion for unanimous consent under Robert's rules does not have the same effect and can raise issues of parliamentary interpretations. This particular amendment would really be a blessing for the parliamentarian in future years. It would just expedite, speed up the process because we have this interconnected layering of different sets of rules. So, a rule for unanimous consent request is needed in the diocesan constitution because it is the authority that has priority over the other 3 sets of rules. So a motion to suspend under Robert's Rules of Order, followed by another motion to take a certain action, cannot suspend or vacate a procedural requirement of the Constitution, the canons, or the rules of order that the convention adopts. And it would be very bad precedent to do this otherwise and violate the higher requirement in one of the sets of rules. In fact, Robert's Rules of Order recognizes this very problem about rules that cannot be suspended. And those of you that like to get into the details of things, you can look it up, and there's this entire thing on Robert's Rules of Order and why this would be an important thing to have. The unanimous consent is presently available under Robert's Rules, but even without a motion to suspend the rules, the unanimous consent request under Robert's Rules cannot waive a constitutional or canonical procedural requirement. The proposed amendment provides for a procedure to simplify and expedite the conduct of the meetings when the members of the convention are unanimous. Therefore, The Committee on the Constitution and Canons moves the adoption of amendment to the Constitution of the Diocese, with this being the first of 2 conventions to approve it as follows.
The amendment is before you. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Abstentions? The amendment is approved. Parliamentarian thanks you.
And I thought it was going to be unanimous. All right. Amendments relating to disabilities. The Constitution and canons have many provisions that use the term disability. Disability, as many of you know, is a very technical term in the law. The provisions that's used in our canons are actually inaccurately worded and could be misapplied in a way that was never intended. This issue came to light in 2021 during the regional community listening sessions on amending Canon 54 relating to diocesan stewardship and parish viability. Many provisions in the Constitution and the canons state that a certain rule will apply if an individual who holds an office is disabled or absent. The rule uses the term disability in an inaccurate way. The proposed amendments are technical and conforming and provide that the particular rule will apply only if the individual is absent or unable to perform the duties of the office. Therefore, the Committee on the Constitution and Canons moves, 1, the adoption of a resolution to amend the Constitution of the Diocese, with this being the first of 2 conventions to approve it, and 2, the adoption of a resolution amending the canons as follows.
No second needed. Discussion on this amendment to the Constitution. All those in favor, aye. Or raised hand, sorry. Thank you. Opposed? Abstentions? The amendment is approved.
All right, and finally, the Standing Committee restructuring for broader regional membership. The Standing Committee of the Diocese is composed of members who are nominated from the regional assemblies or from nominations made from the floor at meetings of the convention. The members are required to be elected by the convention. Article 4 of the Constitution of the General Convention, which controls us, of the Episcopal Church, states that in every diocese a standing committee shall be elected by the convention thereof. The current Constitution and canons of the diocese sets the number of members at 8, provides members will be priests and 4 members will be lay individuals, and provides for regional assemblies to submit multiple nominations for the standing committee. Currently, there are 8 regions. The number of regions may only be changed by amending the canons. Over the years, the prevailing membership of the Standing Committee has not been a representative sample of membership from the 8 regions. The members, both clerical and lay, have disproportionately been elected from certain regions more than others. The proposed amendments to the Constitution and canons would provide that each regional assembly would nominate 1 individual for the Standing Committee. The individual would be clerical or lay and would be from that region. In addition, any number of floor nominations could be made for the Standing Committee at a meeting of the convention. The floor nominations could be for a qualified individuals from the applicable region, regardless of being clerical or lay. Each regional assembly may choose any qualified individual to be a nominee. A qualified individual is any cleric canonically resident in the diocese from the region, or a lay communicant of this diocese in good standing who is from the region and at least 18 years of age. The proposed amendment requires that each regional assembly will consider the balance of clerical and lay membership on the standing committee when making the nomination, and authorizes the regional assemblies to coordinate efforts to maintain clerical and lay membership on the standing committee. The proposed amendment does not restrict a regional assembly's choice of nominee, such as a requirement that regional assemblies alternate clerical and lay nominations. However, it is anticipated that the regional assemblies will develop a custom or practice to maintain both clerical and lay membership, such as alternating clerical and lay nomination each year that nominations are made. The proposed amendments consolidate the provisions relating to the membership of the canons. This will have the related provisions grouped together and facilitate any future adjustments made by amendments that the convention may decide to make. Therefore, the Committee on the Constitution and Canons moves: 1, the adoption of a resolution to amend the Constitution of the Diocese, with this being the first of 2 conventions to approve it, and the adoption of a resolution amending the canons as follows.
Thank you. The amendment is before you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Thank you. Abstentions? The amendment carries.
That was fast.
Whoa, Tony, let's stop. Let us thank you and thank the Committee on Constitutions and Canons for your work. I mean, just a quick word about that. We operated sort of outside the canons throughout the pandemic because we had to, right? We had to. And it was, the Chancellor was very gracious and a little nervous about all of that. And we have just made some provision for contingencies in the future, or we're moving toward that with our next vote. So I'm really grateful to you.
I would just clarify, Bishop, that one might argue that we
okay, one might argue
we would
that we
not concede that point.
Okay, thank you. I was actually, as soon as I said that, I thought, I probably shouldn't have said that. So, yes. Thank you, Chancellor. I think. We have one final video that we want to show you. And I also just want to, one other thank you that I want to make and acknowledge before this convention, and that is to the members, the longstanding members of the Hunger Fund. The Hunger Fund is sunsetting this year. It's a diocesan ministry that's been active for decades, funding ministries across the diocese to address food insecurity. And it isn't that our commitment to food insecurity is diminished. In fact, it's exponentially increasing. But what's diminished is the desire of congregations to raise money to send to the diocese to disperse outward. What congregations are doing more of is doing things locally in their context and collaboratively. And the Hunger Fund, in its current configuration, asks that we acknowledge their work and allow them to lay that down. So I wonder if you might join me in thanking the Hunger Fund. One more video. You're going to want to stay for this one. This is St. Paul's K Street and their experience of walking their parish bounds.
For me, this all started in the pandemic, and we realized we were going to be worshipping outside. So we started offering something called Mass on the Grass every Sunday at 9 a.m. in rain or wind or shine, quite literally. And we had great numbers of people gathering on the lawn in their little separate pockets with masks on, and we set a little altar up, and it was really lovely. And then one day, during a kind of improvised sermon at Mass on the Grass, I asked people to pause, to stand up, and just to look around and see what they saw. And we realized on our parish lawn that we are surrounded by epic apartment buildings. And there were hundreds of windows looking down onto our little parish lawn. And I thought, good grief, there are people all around, and they could be staring at us right now. And what on earth are they seeing? What on earth are they thinking, right? Some bald guy with vestments on talking about the gospel, some singing, some random people passing the peace in these socially distant ways. And that, I think, intrigued me to start learning more about our actual parish. So my mind goes back, as it often does, to medieval England, right, from whence I came, right? And I remember that in England, back in the day, a few days before Ascension, they would do this strange ritual called beating the bounds, where the parish and the clergy would literally walk the boundaries of the parish. Because, every parish has these boundaries that are very carefully plotted out on maps, And back in the day in England, that really meant something. We decided that we would try to reconstruct something like that. So we gathered on a winter Saturday morning, and we had contacted the diocese, we'd confirmed our boundaries, we'd planned out the route, and I think we walked for maybe 4 or 5 hours. The boundaries are massive. This is a really big geographic area, and it takes in everything from Foggy Bottom West End, stretching all the way south to the Lincoln Memorial. So as we did that very literal walk, we saw a little bit of everything. We saw tourists enjoying the Lincoln Memorial. We walked past tents and homeless encampments. We walked past really packed, busy brunch places that seemed to be the focal point for life and activity. We started just to think on the basis of that, what does it mean to be the church in this place? It gave me a whole different vision of ministry. And I know that when this parish was founded, all those, 100 plus years ago, it was planted here for a reason. Things have changed, but there's still need. There's still, of course, hunger, homeless, but loneliness. People working too many hours. People living here who've moved from all over the country, and really they don't know another soul. And what would it mean for them to be a part of our community? What are the gifts they can bring to us? And how could we give them some experience of transformation? And I've been here now almost 8 years, and I found over the last 2 years, I've had more conversations with people in the neighborhood about the church than ever I have done before. And it started with that walk. At Christmas, our local neighborhood association used our atrium for their Christmas party, and it was stuffed full of neighborhood people who I have seen so many times on the other side of the street. And now we're getting to know them, and they're getting to know us. And these relationships, once they start to roll, they get bigger and they get better, and it's happening every day.
One example of that was the Christmas caroling.
Right.
In December, we went caroling around the neighborhood at a few specific spots, and at one, the neighbors were prepared for us. They had a barrel with a big fire in it and hot cider on a tailgate to hand out, and that was a really great connection with people right around the corner.
The walk was not just a wonderful exercise. It was almost like a spiritual law for us, sort of opening our eyes to the work that God's setting before us and saying, look, a really important part of your system, your polity, your ecclesiology are these boundaries. So get out from behind your desks and get out from behind your books and go out there and do something about it. And that's what we're trying to do over and over again, whether it's singing carols or walking or hosting Christmas parties or standing in dog parks or renovating halls or renovating kitchens. It's all about living into that spiritual responsibility that I believe as Anglicans we have.
So, standing in the back of the church is the gentleman who is responsible for these videos, Mr. Jay Mallon. He's also been taking pictures of us while we've been in convention. Okay, thank you, Jay. Okay, the last tasks are to call on the secretary for a motion to set the date of our annual meeting in 2024. Keith.
I move the 129th annual meeting of the Convention of the Diocese of Washington take place on Friday, January 26th, and Saturday, January 27th, at a place to be determined by the Bishop and Standing Committee.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? Are you opposed, Michelle? Okay. We have a time for next year's convention, I think. Okay, just a couple of things. There are lunch boxes available for you to take home if you want something for the ride. Please turn in your badge. We have people in the aisles to collect them. And friends, we have reached the end of our agenda. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Okay, I think I'm going to take that as acclamation. We are adjourned. We're going to pray. We're going to pray a little bit, but let's stand. It'll be brief, I promise. Creator who gives us courage to take our next step. We are your image of love in the world. Jesus who encourages us to walk on water.
We have all that we need when focused on you.
Spirit who is with us on this faithful journey.
We feel your presence and support.
Holy Trinity, be with us as we go from this place to be your people in this world. Assist us in reviving our congregations to take the next faithful step, even as it's difficult or unknown, and shield our joy, so that others might be encouraged to join us on this path. Amen. May the blessing of God Almighty, Creator, Christ, and Holy Spirit go with you and remain with you this day and forevermore. Amen.
Power of the Spirit.